Join our morning break poll. If the hostages from TWA Flight 847 are safely released, should the U.S. seek retaliatory action? Call 432-9292 and vote. Yes, no, or undecided. Then join Carol Randolph and her guests as they discuss this issue as well as the safety of our airline systems. Next on Morning Break.
The prices this week at Color Tile are electrifying. Ceramic floor and wall tile are now 50% off, but when the sale's over, the prices are gone. Color Tile paint and wall coverings are half off, but these prices can't last long. And mosaic and vinyl floor tile are half off. It's gonna go. So, you better get to Color Tile because this is all gonna go quick as a flash. Uh-oh.
Learn to be an executive gourmet chef. Earn as much as $60,000 a year. Jobs while training. Government financial aid available. Nationally accredited. Morning, evening, and weekend classes. Call 822-0060. You can lower your cancer risk right now. Call the American Cancer Society for this free brochure. Call 483-2600. That's 483-2600. A special investigative report tonight at 6.
The United States is tonight a nation being attacked by international terrorists and who wantonly kill and who seize our innocent citizens as their prisoners.
We're continuing our discussion on terrorism and the fate of the hostages of Flight 847 with my guest, Professor Riyad Ajami. He's a professor of international management at American University. Dr. Yona Alexander, senior researcher, Center for Strategic and International Studies, Georgetown University. He's also the director of the Institute for Studies in International Terrorism at State University of New York. Mark Bruzonsky, journalist and associate editor of Worldview magazine, and John Graney, executive director of the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. He's a retired associate general counsel for the CIA, and it's a pleasure to have all of you here this morning.
Good morning, Carol.
Professor Ajami, let me start with you. You are a Shiite Muslim from Lebanon, and Time magazine has referred to them as being neglected and abused by their wealthy and more powerful Maronite Christians and Sunni Muslims, and they have been radicalized by violence. Would you say that this assessment is correct?
Well, it's definitely correct. The Shias of Lebanon have been traditionally outside the main councils of power. They have been a neglected community, both economically and politically. Southern Lebanon is not as developed as the rest of Lebanon. It's a community that was kept outside for a long, long time. Events in the late 70s, the emergence of Iran and its revolution, and other factors in Lebanon, demographic factors, high birth rate by the Shia community itself, awareness, education, all these factors converge together to suggest to the Shias of Lebanon that they have been outside the main councils of power and they ought to be doing something about it.
To whom do they owe their allegiance? Is it to Syria, to Iran, I mean, just help us understand that. Is there any one particular government that they are more responsive to as opposed to just none at all?
I would say the Shias of Lebanon are a community that stands and looks onto itself without any help from anybody else. The allegiance is not to the Syrians, to the Iranians, or anybody else. It's a community that is discovering that it is taking its rightful place in Lebanese politics and society. And in the process, like all societies on the rise, they are discovering that all kinds of regional powers are beginning to look at them with suspicion. So their allegiance is not to anybody else. It's a community that is looking inward, and it must survive and live in Lebanon and without any connection to anybody else.
Isn't there a danger of all of us looking at the Shiite community as being as radical as the individuals that are holding the hostage? How do you feel personally about that?
Well, naturally, it's easy to develop cliches and suggest that the Shia community is a radical community. The Shia community, by and large, is not a radical community. There were some changes on the scene which suggested that they ought to exercise political power, unfortunately through the use of force. However, by and large, it's not a community that could be easily described as a community that believes in acquiring power through the use of the gun. So this is an incident that would have to be viewed in isolation, and the mainstream of the Shia community itself is not looking upon this arrangement with favor.
How does it look toward the United States? How are we viewed by them?
Well, the Shia community, by and large, views the United States at least favorably. A large number of Shias did migrate to the United States, to Dearborn in Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, is a place where...
This is where Mr. Barry's
yes.
family, farmer family, his wife is there, yes.
His wife and his 6 children are there. He used to live there for a substantial period of time. Anytime he visits the United States, with the exception of the last 2 times he was here, he always goes to Detroit. He views Detroit as home. He's a permanent resident of the United States. And by and large, the Shia community in the United States have had a positive experience in the sense that it was accepted in a community and in a society a bit more than it was accepted in its own surroundings in Lebanon. So one would have to say that by and large it's a positive experience rather than a negative experience.
Are you still, those of you who are in America, can you still maintain close contacts with those who are in Lebanon, or do they see you as possibly selling out, of becoming westernized, if you will?
I would say the contacts are still there. The roots of a lot of American Shias are still in Lebanon. There are a great deal of back and forth travel. There are a great deal of linkages. And it is best exemplified by Nabi Hurri, among others, in the sense that I don't think they believe that the Shias in the West did sell out, because they did not. They have adopted their new home, but they still have a great deal of interest in what goes on in Lebanon, and they are quite tied and linked to that community. And I don't see that there is a great deal of differences or radicalism, with the exception of fringe groupings. And in Lebanon today, as you probably know, any 5 people could form a private militia, and they could take any title, and they could claim this or claim that. But I would say the events suggest that there is not a great deal of support, because when the hijackers returned back to Beirut, they had to ask and appeal for some help from others to join them. So that might suggest it is basically an act that is not totally representative of what the Shia community would want.
I see you shaking your head on that,
as a footnote to what we had said, that I personally interviewed some Shiite in Lebanon who were very strongly supporters of the United States. In other words, in contradistinction to those who want to drive the United States from the Middle East, they said basically, look, we were discriminated against for a long time, and we want to reassert ourselves, and we really want to side with the United States. We need really the support and the assistance in order to establish ourselves, develop economically and socially, politically, and we need U.S. aid. So again, I think it would be a great mistake to lump all the Shiites in one basket. Having said that, I think one is to look also the strategic dimension in the region. For example, Iran has very clear strategic aims, which might be different than some of the Shiites in Lebanon. And particularly, one is to put it in the broader context, when the French ruled over Syria and Lebanon, and for different interests, constellation of power, they at that time tried to provide the Christian community with the upper end. And of course, the demography, as Riyadh indicated, changed, and one is to see it against the backdrop of what had happened in the interwar period as well.
Well, when you say all of this, I am left with a distinct impression that we are viewing what is happening with the hostages of Flight 847 in isolation. We are responding on a case-by-case basis, and as a result of that, maybe we will never be prepared for something else, or we're always caught off guard. Is that what's happening? Do you all agree?
Absolutely. I think the grave mistake is to look at terrorism in isolation And you have to put it in much broader perspective. Today we have a very clear drama going on in Lebanon, but one for a while at least forgets what's happening in Central America or in Nicaragua. And this is part of the whole strategic constellation of power, meaning that it's no longer a question of man against man or missile against missile. It is low-intensity warfare that is being waged against the United States throughout the world. And those who perpetrate this specific kind of activity are clearly the Soviet Union, the proxies such as the Cubans, as well as the wild cards of the international system, specifically Iran and Syria and Libya and others. So I think I see it in a broader context, and unless we understand the strategic dimension of the problem, I really don't think the United States can develop the capability and strategies to deal with the problem effectively.
Mark, you agree with this, that we are looking at this in isolation?
I agree with the premise, but not with the conclusion. I think the reason the United States has such a hard time dealing with these issues is that we have a very short collective memory in this country, and we have a very hard time with cause and effect in international relations. I would very much disagree with Dr. Alexander that this should be looked at in the larger geostrategic Soviet-American competition. I would look at it as a result of the actions that have been taken by the United States and by our surrogate in the region, which has become Israel, over the last decade. I would see the result that we're witnessing today as being caused by what happened when Israel and the United States attempted to remold Lebanon in their own vision. It was only a few years ago that our Secretary of State was in the region making an alliance between the Phalange Maronite regime and Israel, attempting to create exactly the kind of Lebanon that the Shiites didn't want. It was only 2 years ago that our ships were off the coast sending 16-inch shells, 2,000-pound bombs that have an accuracy, when they're accurate, of about a quarter mile into the hills of Lebanon. It was only a few years ago that our planes were engaged in bombing, and this is not to mention the fact that many people in the region hold us responsible for what the Israelis have done, rightly or wrongly. That's probably another show.
We have to go to a break. We're also closing our poll, so if you're going to participate, do so now. We'll be right back.
Jack Sprites did not need fat, so their mom bought Lean Supreme hot dogs.
Hot dogs, yum! Lean Supreme,
Said she.
They cut the fat, about a third less fat. Scrumptious Lean Supreme. I like that.
Said Jackie. The other Sprites agreed, and happily and hungrily they picked the platter clean.
What's that? Imagine that.
Delicious Lean Supreme.
We're Beatrice.
Sargent's invites you to put yourself in your dog's place. Suppose you had the fleas, the itching, the scratching. You'd want relief on the double. You'd want him to give you Sargent's new double-layer flea and tick collar. Sargent's double layers kill fleas and ticks like both a powder and a spray. And Sargent's keeps killing for 5 full months. Your best friend needs relief on the double. Sargent's new double-layer flea and tick collar. He'd do it for you.
How could something that looks so funny?
Thomas's muffins on your plate. Make everything on top.
Butter or burgers or melted cheese. No other muffins.
Even tuna fishes taste more.
Thomas's English muffins.
Toast up the crunchy nooks and crannies of a Thomas's, and everything you put on top tastes better.
The original one and only funny looking tasty cooking.
On the next Hollywood Close-Up, meet the understanding stars of Secret Admirers.
Take your hands off my daughter, Fruit Lips.
Then meet the man with Bogart's face.
I kid you not.
You know, Robert, Saatchi really does look like Bogey.
I said, gee, you're the first guy that's ever told me that.
Plus, sail the seas with Tony Dow and find out what lies in store for the Beavers.
Well, we're just saving on our milk and cookies, and we're going to find a new home for it.
All on the next smashing Hollywood Close-Up.
We were saying earlier, Dr. Alexander and I were saying about travel, even in the United States, and I mentioned the fact that I was rather fearful of this, and he said, in that sense, we are all hostages. But we were looking at that clip there, and that shows us, overall, have we learned anything from Iran? The president spoke of the fact that in Iran there was a government, there was a source of authority, which is quite different from this. Mr. Green, let me get you involved in this.
Well, I'd like to follow up on what Mark said just before the break, and I think there's an element of cause and effect, but I think you really do have to go back and notice the role that the Soviets play worldwide. To follow up on what Dr. Alexander said, if you start with Syria, you have the Soviet role there. Then you move over to Afghanistan, you come back over to Yemen, you come to Ethiopia, you go to South Africa, you come around to Angola, then you come across to Cuba and Central America. I think the roles that the Soviet plays behind all these scenes, and if you'll notice, when one pops up, the others settle down, that I think it's an orchestration behind the scenes.
You were saying they have control of this very radical group. They can control this.
I wouldn't so much as say control, but I think they influence them. I think there's an element of influence.
May I, just a footnote, I fully agree with that, because I think the Middle East is a subsystem in the confrontation between the United States and Soviet Union. One has to look at this as well. And of course there are indigenous problems, but I would like to suggest that the Soviet Union, if they can fish in muddy water, they would do it. And I personally know of Shiites who were recruited by the Lebanese Communist Party. They were sent to the Soviet Union, were trained, sent back to South Lebanon in order to perpetrate some terrorist act. In other words, it's not that the Soviets control, but they try to exploit a situation.
But haven't we done the same thing? Haven't we trained some terrorist groups? We haven't called them the same thing.
No, absolutely not. I think you're making a very great mistake.
Carol.
They're not, let me, look.
Well, I'm between you two, so I feel I have to speak up.
That's all right, but the point is I cannot accept those who try to equate the United States and the Soviet Union. There are two different value systems. The United States is not training terrorists. If they train freedom fighters like in Afghanistan. In Central America, I would agree. If the Contras, which can be involved in insurgency according to international law, but if they are engaged in terrorism, we can call them terrorists. But the United States is not engaged in training terrorists.
Let me get Mark involved. Yes.
My two colleagues, Yona can't accept this kind of linkage. We all read on the front pages of our papers, we're all aware of the most recent incident. We're all aware of CIA links to the killing of 80 people in a terror bomb. Apparently, they were going after the leader of the Shiites, Fadhallah. There's a terrible reluctance in this country, and we might as well, say it bluntly. There's a terrible reluctance to admit the errors of our ways, the lack of knowledge that we have of the region. And with all respect to my colleagues, I think when people start degenerating into a broader discussion of the Soviet-American role in this particular incident, it's because they don't know a lot about the regional forces and the specific things that are taking place in the region.
Let me get Professor Jami in there. Do you agree with that?
Well, I believe Mark is touching upon a point that ought to be addressed legitimately. Yes, the Soviet Union and its surrogate states in the region will continue attempting to do all kind of nasty things, will continue attempting to derail the peace process, will continue fishing and creating problems for the United States. But the mere fact also is what Mark suggested too, that there is some perception on the part of people in Lebanon that the United States, whether correctly or incorrectly, have helped create a situation which he alluded to,
with Israel.
Yes, well, the linkage to the state of Israel, but more so to the point, the action in April where 80 people died. I'm sure you must have seen the banner on that building, Made in USA, reference to the action.
Plus death to America.
Plus death to America. That, there was also evidence that came out later on that the United States was not totally involved, but its agents on the ground, or indirectly the Lebanese, that took it upon themselves. They were at least aided initially by the United States, but ultimately the United States pulled out of the arrangement. That perception is relatively there, and that is the perception that is fueling the passion of these people. So we cannot always argue that it is totally
What does that all mean for those hostages who are scattered somewhere in the area of Baruch?
Go back to this argument.
Well, I don't want to just get stuck in that broader issue, because I really want to deal with the hostages now. I mean,
but I think this is related directly to the hostage question, because I support the theme that Bob Woodward's story on the front page of the Post, which was not verified, which was not come up with accurate information, incensed these terrorists. If you'll notice the increase of incidents after that story broke, which blamed the U.S., which brought out this publicity and all those things, that gave them the flame to get started again.
Did they need an article in the Washington Post to draw those conclusions?
Well, I would say they might not have needed an article, but the article did not help. The fact that they knew that at least the Secret Service in Lebanon worked closely with the United States at the initial stage. They suspected that. They were not too sure. But as you probably know, there are always all kinds of insinuations that whatever the Lebanese government does, whatever that shell may mean, because there is not an effective Lebanese government, but the Secret Service in Lebanon, if it does certain things, at that time it was going to be attributed to the United States. So they did not need an article, but there was a strong suspicion, and the article did not help.
What about, let me go to specifically those hostages, because that's where our thoughts are, that's where our prayers are. What do you feel, from what you know, from what all of you know about this? Let's just say that the phone is ringing now, and Israelis are going to release or acquiesce to the request, and they're going to release these prisoners. What then?
Well, if that was to happen today, one must make distinction between the long run and the short run. If the Israelis agree today to release the detained...
It's better. They're safer if it's a short run.
If they make the decision which they already made before. Anyway, they were going to release a large number of the detained people from the south. They were roughly going to release about 400 people, 300 to 400 people. If they go ahead with that, within reasonable time frame, within the next 48 hours, I think the tendency is likely to be to let the people go and free the ones who were captured recently. But the fate of the other 7 people is still questionable.
I want to get into both of that, but let me hold you on that point. Help me understand this. If the Israelis, and this has been asked by everybody on everybody's network about, if the Israelis were going to release these individuals anyway, is there any particular group that does not understand the courage of the Israeli soldier or the combat readiness of the Israeli people to take on any enemy? Why is it that they can't just go ahead and say, we were planning to release them and we're going to release them?
Yeah, but I think the way you phrase the question is somewhat unrealistic in this sense. Every nation, like every individual, they do have feelings, they have pride. And you cannot indicate, especially when the gun is pointed at you for a very long time.
But the gun has always been pointed at them, yes.
Yes, but it's really a question of perception. And I agree with Riyadh in terms of perception in Lebanon itself and in general. You cannot say because they are the hostages, you can go and release them without giving the impression that you submit, you cave in. And no nation, responsible nation, can do that. And you can argue that in a way it's not an Israeli problem because Americans are held hostage, but it is an Israeli problem. It's the problem of the free world.
But that's my point. I mean, if you talk about perception, and I mean, I'm just your average American citizen here, but I think of the Israeli, I see them as tough. I see them as no nonsense. So if they decided to do this, I don't see it diminishing them. But I mean, I am seeing this, I suppose, from my own perspective and thinking about the husbands and wives and families who are sitting there worried about their loved ones.
Yes, Carol, Yona's given the case, we have a counterpoint going here. He's given the case for the Israelis being reluctant to acquiesce in...
Well, I'm not... I can't...
Well, we know you're not a spokesperson for that, but just since you gave that explanation, yes.
I think we have to understand how the Shiite, the 766 of them, got there in the first place. They were illegally taken across the border. They were the result of an iron fist policy in which Israel used various forms. You can call it brutality, you can call it terrorism, whatever you want to call it. But anyone who goes back and reads the newspapers earlier this year will know that the defense minister of Israel declared an iron fist policy, which was dedicated to the proposition that Israel had the police authority to take anyone it wanted and to do anything it wanted, and no one stopped and no one protested, except the Americans did protest when the Shiites were taken across the border, when our own State Department said an illegal act was being committed. So 2 points, I think, should be made sort of to buttress the outline that you just gave. First, that they're already illegally in Israel. Secondly, that there aren't charges against most of them. Thirdly, that Israel has just released over 1,000 Palestinians, some of whom most of the world believes were actually guilty of murder crimes, and they did that in exchange for 3 Israeli soldier hostages. So the thesis that they might want to release people they were already going to release anyway for American hostages does seem to me quite reasonable.
Hold your point a minute. Let's try for a phone call. Go right ahead, please. You're on the air. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes.
Go right ahead, please.
Good morning. I would like to comment upon... yes, I would like to comment upon...
Turn your volume down and speak directly into the phone.
Yes, yes?
Go right ahead, please.
I'd like to comment upon the fact. Yes?
We'll have to move on. I'm sorry. There is a
I'd like to comment upon the fact.
No, I'm afraid we'll have to move on. Can we try for another phone call, please? Let me just explain. There is a 7-second delay, and that is the reason for the feedback on that. I'll let you make your point while we're trying to get the phone
Your
straight.
discussion and description of the Israelis, I think, is very accurate. But bear in mind that reputation has been built by the very thing that the president was focusing on last night, that you don't negotiate and give in to the terrorist demands. That this is you negotiate, but you don't give in, you don't pay ransom. And I think the reputation of the Israelis has demonstrated that as hard as it may be on the victims, and nobody would sell that short, but I think that's what they have developed, that position not to pay ransoms.
We asked the question of our viewers if we can get the hostages out safely, whether or not the United States should retaliate. I'd like to get your views on this. We'll get the results of our poll when we come back.
New music, and what statement are today's artists trying to make? Join us in studio Thursday evening for a special taping of live performances, and meet Bob Guccione Jr., the editor of the new Spin magazine, along with the other pioneers of today's new trends. For free reservations, call 364-3760. That's 364-3760.
Look at this peaceful landscape. Peaceful now, but 40 years ago, thousands of innocents were murdered here daily. And this week's People reports on Joseph Mengele through the chilling words of those who escaped him. Then, People brings you Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis taking on new roles and paying the price of being perfect. Next, John Denver, Stephanie Powers, and Ted Turner throw a 75th birthday party for Jacques Cousteau, the old man of the sea, and much, much more. This week, listen to those who escaped the angel of death.
Would you like to live free in your own home? Or know how to buy real estate without cash credit? Or even a job? Or retire in 3 to 5 years on a $50,000 a year income by just working the equivalent of 1 weekend a month? Then watch The Millionaire Maker. Real estate expert and multimillionaire Ed Beckley hosts a dynamic half hour that reveals techniques of how to make a fortune buying real estate with no money down.
Don't miss Millionaire Maker, Friday, June 21st, 12:30 a.m.
Delicious Breyer's Ice Cream presents the eye test. First, eye this label. Sodium phosphate, polysorbate, AD, ammonium bicarbonate. Now, eye this Breyer's label. Only milk, strawberries, sugar, and cream. Now, which would you rather eat? A mouthful of sodium phosphate or a creamy mouthful of... Breyer's taste.
Yay! Breyer's all-natural ice cream. Nothing but pure enjoyment. If you could select your own rates...
Okay, lady. What will it be?
You choose the lowest. Yet people still pay higher rates for long distance when U.S. Telecom can save them more than MCI, more than Sprint, and up to 40% more than AT&T. Anytime, anywhere, to any other state. With no fees or minimums. Make your next call toll-free to U.S. Telecom.
The one on the right.
1-800-531-1985. U.S. Telecom. The right price.
We asked this question of our viewer, if the hostages from TWA Flight 847 are safely released, should the U.S. seek retaliatory action? We received 392 phone calls. 62% of you said yes, 36% of you said no, and 2% were undecided. But let me raise this question that the President raised, too, last night. The problem is, who do you strike? If you have no government, as you did with Iran, who do you go after?
Well, obviously, the President cannot say everything in a press conference. But
well, that's what he said. He prefaced it all by saying
absolutely. But I think, again, we were looking at this particular case, but we cannot look at this case in isolation. In a way, to respond to some of the things that had been said before, it's not because of this attack, let's say, in March. Clearly, this escalated the tension there, but one has to see it in the broader context. Why was it that the American embassy was attacked in '79 and taken over by the Iranians? And why was it that there was a series of attacks on U.S. targets in Lebanon? The embassy twice, the Marine base, before there was the perception that the United States was involved. The point I'm making is that unless the U.S. government and the free world would see terrorism for what it is an assault on democratic societies. It is a weapon. It is a tool in the broad conflict. And unless the West would join forces, military and civilian, to deal with the problem, I think we're going to remain hostages to these blackmailers for many years to come.
Well, when you say that, and you say don't look at it in isolation and all that, it looks as if you have pinpointed in your mind a possibility of pinpointing a government, but then there is the possibility of having more terrorists act here in the United States. Isn't that very true?
No, the Americans are ready F terrorism because Americans are target number one throughout the world. And why do you think you have the barricades or the walls of Jericho around the State Department and the White House and Congress? The perception is there. And in fact, you just mentioned before that Americans are afraid to fly. So the targets are not those victims, the hostages in Lebanon today. It's the wider audience. I think the victims are those who live in democratic institutions in order to submit to the perpetrators, and one is to sit in
well, I would gather that you would be in favor of some retaliatory action.
No question about it. It's a question of trying to impose a penalty of some cost on those who are responsible for financing, for training, and for organizing some of these activities.
All of you agree?
Well, basically, you have to ask the question, is there a return address? Who do you strike? Where do you strike?
Well, that's what I asked, yes.
So basically, these issues are not resolved, and they're not likely to be resolved in a difficult place like Beirut. So just to strike...
Dr. Alexander seems to know where to go, so...
To strike in the dark would not be very useful for a country like the United States, a country with democratic principles where we do not immediately just respond. Yes, there ought to be a strategy and a policy of dealing with terrorism for a country like the United States, but to go ahead and strike without knowing where are you going to strike, this is a difficult situation.
I believe Secretary Weinberger said the very same thing, that you really do need to know specifically.
Again, I think it should be very clear. The term retaliation, I think, is the wrong term. You have to use the term self-defense, and you have a wide range of options. You have diplomatic option, you have the economic option, and the military as the last resort. And I agree with Riyadh, you cannot simply go and strike without knowing what you're doing.
An embargo, would you consider that?
Absolutely, an economic embargo.
Would it work without having other countries? Mark is laughing at this. Why are you laughing, Mark?
Carol, we have a president, we have a Secretary of State. We've all seen the film clips the last few days. They all came into office talking generalities, as Yona's now talking this morning. They promised us they were going to do this. They promised us we would be tough. They promised us we wouldn't take it. And yet when it comes down to a situation where we can't really determine who is in fact responsible, and more importantly, where it's been proved historically that our response usually generates only a worse response. The answer to your question of why our embassy was taken in Iran and why we have hostages, why we had hostages for a year kept in Tehran, was because of the history of American interaction with Iranian society beginning in the 50s and through the 60s and through the 70s. So I'm afraid I find it slightly irresponsible to talk about this issue in total generalities unless Dr. Alexander is prepared to tell us what instruments he is going to use and who he thinks he's going to strike.
Absolutely, I'm ready to do that.
Tell us now, then, who?
Okay, first of all, I think we have to look at those wild cards in the international system, such as Libya. Let me take a very specific case, such as Iran and such as Syria. In the Libyan case, we find that Gaddafi promoted terrorism throughout the world. You take the British, and in London, as you may recall, the embassy, they killed, they used the embassy as a base to kill a British policewoman, and then business was as usual. In other words, it's double talk. Unless you see terrorism for what it is, as a strategic threat, and then you develop the capabilities. So here is one instance. In the case of Iran, I think Iran continued its activities and continuing its activities today, training terrorists, financing them, providing them with arms, not only in regard to Lebanon, but in regard to the Persian Gulf. We had instances there too. And I think the international community has to decide whether they regard those countries as respected members of the international community or as modern pirates. If they are modern pirates, I think we have the right of self-defense, and we have to do whatever is necessary on the diplomatic level.
Which would include military action.
Include as a last resort.
As a last resort.
Correct.
Let's go out to the audience for a question, comment. Go right ahead.
There's one comment I'd like to make that has bothered me because I've heard no discussion about it on any program. The whole world stood still, did nothing, when 100,000 of the Lebanese were murdered by the PLO and by Syria and other forces, and Israel decided to do something about it. It cost them not only their reputation and all the rest of it, they get no credit for cleaning out the PLO, and that's very disturbing. What does bother me, if the President and the State Department and all the rest have no answers, what is the answer for us? And I don't expect you four gentlemen to decide it, but I noticed that in the brilliant editorial, he has Herblock had Flight 1985, and it shows 3 terrorists on top of the world. The only constructive thing I've heard so far is to keep Greece from having our planes land there, and I think it's time. Where are the Saudis and our friends from the oil business? Aren't they expected? We have a Saudi prince running around. Aren't we expected to look to our friends and the Arabs to come forth and help us in this point?
What about that? Where are our friends from those countries? Have they played any major role? Yes.
There's a reason there hasn't been a discussion of the woman's premise. We don't have time today. The reason is because her facts were erroneous in the beginning. But her larger question is more important. And I think the answer is really to be found in a general perception throughout the region that it's very difficult to come to the defense of the United States, that it's very difficult to rely on the United States, and weak Arab governments, which comprises most of them, are unwilling to put their own life on the line to support a country whose policies they have not been able to either understand or agree with.
Well, if the United States, I think Mark is completely wrong, because it is the U.S. today and its presence that does prevent the Soviet Union from moving into the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. And nations like Turkey or NATO, which really prevented the Soviets from painting the whole globe red. And I think this is irresponsible to indicate that because the United States had done whatever the United States had done, and we're going back to ancient history, we cannot turn the clock back. I can make a very good case against the French as well and the British trying to divide nations. And this is really irresponsible. I think we're facing today a major strategic threat to the United States and the free world. We're facing a major threat from terrorism, which is being used and exploited by various nations. And unless we're going to take action, I think we're going to turn the whole world into a jungle.
We have to go to a break. I'll let you respond when we come back. I'd also like to get into the 7 hostages, one of whom I believe has been held for about a year, over a year and a couple of months. We'll take a brief pause and come right back.
Next, a look at the safety of our airline systems. is today's job bank. EEO representative, Northwest Washington, $47,000 per year. Temporary personnel assistant, Northwest Washington, $7,000 per year. Dry cleaners presser, Falls Church, Virginia, $5 per hour. Silk presser, Southeast Washington, $3.70 per hour. Alteration tailor, Southeast Washington, $5 per hour. Secretary, Northwest Washington, $16,000 to $18,000 per year. Chauffeur, Silver Spring, Maryland, $5.75 to $7.50 per hour. Telephone marketing, Rockville, Maryland, $5 per hour plus commissions. If you're looking for a job or an employer with a job opening, call 724-3785 for your nearest employment center. And that is today's Job Bank.
Pardon me, ma'am.
Do I know you? What are you doing?
Towel's not clean.
Yes, it is.
Smell it.
I think it's clean.
How can you tell if a brown towel is clean?
Good question. You can tell with clean-smelling Gain. It not only gets out tough dirt you do see, it also gets out smelly dirt you don't see. When it comes to clean, sometimes you can see better with your nose than with your eyes. Smell for yourself.
Towel, mister.
That's a clean brown towel.
Gain, because when it comes to clean, sometimes you can see better with your nose than with your eyes.
You're gonna love clean-smelling Gain. So we're putting another reason to try it right under your nose. A $1 coupon good on any size box. Send your name and address to this address, and we'll send you a $1 coupon.
Johnston's No Roach.
Johnston's No Roach works.
And it lasts. Get Johnston's No Roach Brush On or Trigger Spray, and it's good riddance to repulsive roaches, hideous water bugs, annoying ants. Protection that lasts for months with Johnston's No Roach. And get the knockout power of No Roach aerosol. No mess, no roaches that fast.
Johnston's No Roach.
Johnston's No Roach works.
Write your initials in that greasy mess.
Yes.
Would you think of using a glass cleaner on that?
No.
Think again. Try Glass Plus. Mrs. Sinclair has never used Glass Plus before. She's in for a surprise.
It is really shiny.
Think Glass Plus can clean lipstick without streaking?
I don't know. There's no streaks.
Glass Plus cleans glass.
Plus a whole lot more.
I'm directing that the following steps be taken. I have directed the Secretary of Transportation, in cooperation with the Secretary of State, to explore immediately an expansion of our Armed Sky Marshal program aboard international flights of U.S. air carriers for better protection of passengers. I have directed the Secretary of State to issue an immediate travel advisory for U.S. citizens traveling through the Athens International Airport, warning them of dangers. This warning shall remain in effect until the Greek government has improved the security situation there, and until it has demonstrated a willingness to comply with the security provisions of the U.S.-Greek Civil Aviation Agreement and the Tokyo, Montreal, and Hague Conventions regarding prosecution and punishment of air pirates. I've asked for a full explanation of the events surrounding the takeover of the aircraft in Athens. I have appealed through the Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration for all U.S. air carriers to review the wisdom of continuing any flights into Athens until the security situation there improves. And further, I have asked Secretaries Schultz and Dole to report to me on whether we should terminate the service of foreign air carriers whose governments do not honor appropriate international conventions or provide adequate security at their airports. I'm calling upon all allied and friendly governments to redouble their efforts to improve airport security and take other measures to prevent the hijacking of aircraft. I will also be asking them to take steps to prevent travel to places where lawlessness is rampant and innocent passengers are unprotected. And I'm urging that no American enter any Middle Eastern country that does not publicly condemn and disassociate itself from this atrocity and call for the immediate safe release of our citizens.
All right, that was again the president last night addressing the nation before his press conference. John, I promised you an opportunity to respond, and I'd like to tag on to that, what he said about airport security. Are we, obviously, our system here in the United States, how safe are we?
The point I would just like to make at the end of the last one, I would disagree entirely with Mark's conclusion that the United States was responsible for the problems in Iran from '53 on. Iran was in good shape. It was at the end when things fell apart, when the Shah left. Enough for that point. With regard to airport security, I think the American people begin to react negatively when they're interfered with in their time to get through the airports and things like that. I think today you'd find everybody willing to have every piece of luggage carefully screened for their own safety. I think they are willing to accept this, and my feeling is that the thing that makes the United States so much better than the rest of the areas of chaos is the fact that we have law and order. We have people that abide by the law. We have uniformed people inspecting the baggage. We protect our citizens. Just look, for example, the other side of the coin. How about the Soviets shooting down the KAL 007? I mean, that issue hasn't been brought up again, but I think that goes back to what Dr. Alexander said, that there is an element of Soviet involvement behind all of this terrorism around the world.
Are we safe in your mind flying here in the United States? Would you fly anywhere overseas? Are there airports that you would not go in?
I wouldn't go to Beirut.
Well, I think quite a number of us would agree with you, but are there other airports that you would not go fly in?
I'd prefer not to fly in the Middle East generally, right now.
Period. But what about, I mean, everybody, I know people here in the station who were going to the Greek islands, and some, in fact, are there now. What about that?
Well, having had an experience where our chief of station, Dick Welch, was murdered in Greece, I've never wanted to go back to Greece myself, so that I have a personal problem with Greece. I think there's a political problem in Greece that hasn't been mentioned. The recent elections, the question of NATO, it is an unstable area. I think politically it's unstable.
Could you hold your point? Let me try for a phone call. Don't forget your point here. Well, go right ahead, please. You're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Carol.
Yes.
I've got a comment. It seems like it's a lot of money wasted in this country on defense because we spend billions of dollars every year to build up the defense to protect us from aggression and to keep the peace in the world. And it seems like we're missing the boat. In the last 30 years, we've spent all these billions of dollars and we seem to be turning the other cheek. And we have aggression right now from the Shiites, and I'm sure most of that is being, it's coming from Syria. I think Syria is behind all this. They were behind Iran when they started this trouble with us. And I think if it's not long, we're going to have the terrorists right here, and it's not going to hit it's not just going to hit one time, it's going to hit 4 or 5 times, and it's going to hit big targets in this country here.
All right, thank you for your comment. Yes, Dr. Alexander.
If I may put it in a different perspective, and that's what I'm trying to aim today. We're looking at the trees, but we don't look at the forest. Here you're asking a question about international civil aviation. I thought this is a given that we are free to travel where we want. But this is
Obviously
not the point.
Not,
the point is all of us are potential victims. We have to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is beyond that. I mean, I can give you other scenarios and other instances where people were victimized, traveling in Europe or Latin America. The bottom line is, what kind of a world do we want? Are we going to respect the rights of each member of the international community? Are we going to respect human rights? Because terrorism is a challenge to basic fundamental human rights. And I think this is the question that we should address.
Let's go out to the audience, please. Go right ahead, please.
Yes, I think Dr. Alexander is hitting right at what I was going to say here, really. One problem that we're doing is we're not reacting to the people who don't live by our standards. We're too humanitarian. We try to stay too humanitarian. Really what we have to do in a case like this, with this plane, we should have appealed to the Israelis at the first point to give us an hour to execute until they released the hostages they were holding. If they killed one of the hostages, we should have executed 10. And if we looked at them, oh, this is the way things are going to be done, this would appeal to them on a level they understand. They're trying to get the Shiites out of Israel. But if the Israelis were to turn them over to be executed for holding that plane, then they would be completely losing their purpose.
Would you agree with that this is an attitude, something, an approach that they would have understood and that they would have acquiesced to that?
Well, if the issue is really the safety and security of the hostages itself, I don't know that this will make the hostages any safer.
Yes.
On the issue of the level of violence, yes, Lebanon is a society that has been dealing with violence for the last 10, 11 years. But if the central issue here is to secure the release of the hostages safely, I'm not too sure that would accomplish that.
Let's go back out into the audience very quickly, please.
How does this crisis impact on the search for a lasting peace in the Middle East, particularly in the light of King Hussein's new initiatives to find peace in the Middle East?
Well, this is the issue that was put forth, that maybe the Syrians or somebody else is involved in derailing the peace process. Anytime you have violence in the Middle East, the peace process is going to be derailed. As long as the hostage issue is alive, I don't think we are going to be able to discuss any broader Middle Eastern peace issues.
So it's just on hold at the moment?
That will be on hold for quite some time, and it could be, if one wants to attribute any role to the Syrians, somebody could look into that. However, the evidence is not very clear that they had something to do with it. But the fact remains, yes, now the peace process, whatever was left of it or whatever was started with it, is still on hold and will be on hold as long as this issue is with us.
Let me interject this before we go back out, too. What about those 7 individuals? I saw a relative on one of the networks saying that, and I'm speaking of the 7 who were held, in some instances, a year and longer. They have not had the same kind of national attention from the media. This doesn't mean that somebody wasn't working behind the scenes to get them to freedom. But what about those individuals? Will they come out of all of this? I'm assuming that all of our hostages will be released safely. But what about those 7?
Well, this is really the very point. I think you cannot isolate individuals when they were taken hostage or by religion, as the attempt that was made on the airplane to isolate those with Jewish sounding names and so on. The point is that we cannot submit to blackmailers, period. And one has to see it, as I indicated before, in the broader context, because there are many grievances.
But Dr. Alexander, are we going to get those 7 people back? Are we going to get the rest? I mean, those individuals,
I
who
think
knows
we have
where
to
they...
insist that the responsibility of the government is to protect the citizens at home and abroad and do whatever is necessary in order to get them back.
All right. Let me see if we can go out to the audience again. Are we having a little trouble with the mic up there?
I was just wondering, how do you protect against a kamikaze type mentality, whereas they're willing to die the ultimate just to get their point across?
That was the dilemma the president talked about, too. I mean, when you have individuals who say they're going to find paradise by dying for their cause, how do you protect yourself, protect your citizens?
Well, I'm prepared to respond, at least from my limited experience interviewing some of the Shiite terrorists and others, the kamikaze or the martyrs. And I think it's a grave mistake just to look at those individuals. Those individuals, they don't come out of the blue. They're being trained, they're being equipped, and they're being sent. Because this particular, I think, hijacking is a classic example of coordination, of planning. And it was orchestrated. It didn't just happen.
Somebody said they follow the book all the way on.
Well, it's the book and the instructions and so on. And the point I'm trying to make throughout this program, that there are state sponsors who are responsible for the turmoil in the Middle East. Because if there is a willingness to resolve outstanding questions and issues, it can be done. We can see what happened between Israel and Egypt. President Sadat and Begin, they signed a peace treaty.
But they also had a Carter who was mediating between the two. Yeah. Let's go to a break. We'll be right back.
What is new music, and what statement are today's artists trying to make? Join us in studio Thursday evening for a special taping of live performances, and meet Bob Guccione Jr., the editor of the new Spin magazine, along with the other pioneers of today's new trends. For free reservations, call 364-3760. That's 364-3760.
They've just found Jordan innocent.
But the magazine's full.
Well, we'll have to work fast. So, this I like. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
A smart telephone?
Oh, I can't take that.
Break away to High Point decaffeinated coffee. Break away to the smooth taste and relax. High Point gently removes not only caffeine, but also bitterness that can interrupt your coffee pleasure.
We made it.
Good.
Make the most of your relaxing moments with High Point decaffeinated coffee.
When you can't or shouldn't climb stairs, look to America's #1 line of stairway lifts. The Stair Glide Deluxe is designed to transport you upstairs and down, eliminating stairs as a barrier and returning your freedom. American Stair Glide, providing specialized lifting equipment for the elderly and handicapped for over 30 years.
We can help you. Call 499-1000. Division Health and Medical Supplies. That's 499-1000.
To bake baked beans this savory, rich, and delicious, you would sort them and soak them, measure in the mustard, slice the bacon, pack the brown sugar, approve the seasonings. Then bake them in a real brick oven until the sun went down. If you had the time, you could bake beans like this, or you could buy B&M baked beans. There's really no other choice.
Sergeant's invites you to put yourself in your dog's place. Suppose you had the fleas, the itching, the scratching. You'd want relief on the double. You'd want him to give you Sergeant's new double-layer flea and tick collar. Sergeant's double layers kill fleas and ticks like both a powder and a spray. And Sergeant's keeps killing for 5 full months. Your best friend needs relief on the double. Sergeant's new double-layer flea and tick collar. He'd do it for you.
Have your team join our team for fun and games on Wheel of Fortune, weeknights at 7:30, right here on Channel 9.
We are continuing our conversation here. We're almost out of time. I want to thank all of you for being my guests this morning. Hopefully, the situation will end very quickly. But, Mark, I did want to give you the opportunity to respond about how do we protect ourselves.
Thanks. It's the fundamental question, as is the peace question that was asked. We won't have time for that. My disagreement with Yonah, it's been obvious on the show this morning. You don't protect yourself by simply drawing barriers around your institutions and striking out mindlessly on some thesis that someone else is involved in it.
I'm sorry.
You protect yourself. You'll be next, I'm sure. You protect yourself also by dealing with the causes and the history that has led to the situation that you're in. And I've heard very little of that from two colleagues on both sides of me this morning.
Answer this question. Why did President Sadat agree to sign a peace agreement with Israel? Why?
Because he believed that Israel would honor that agreement and make a comprehensive peace and give the Palestinians their rights. Which, of course, Yonah, you know, has not occurred, which is another reason why we're in the situation we're in.
Look, I think you live in a different world. The realistic world is...
Well, I live in a different world from you, Yonah.
No, I'm sorry. You don't... You live somewhere else because...
There's chocolate-covered sunshine in every raisinette. Chocolate-covered sunshine in every raisinette. It's the sunniest taste you'll ever get. 'Cause there's chocolate-covered sunshine in every raisinette.
Pick plump, juicy, wholesome raisins.
Sunshine.
Drench them in creamy Nestle milk chocolate, and you've got delicious chocolate-covered sunshine.
Sensational! Chocolate-covered sunshine in every raisinette.
Time takes you beyond the news.
Time flies, and you are there. Time cries and lets you care. You understand the world we share.
This week in Time, hijacked terror, a new hostage crisis, Islamic fanaticism, can we retaliate? And Nazi Joseph Mengele, is the manhunt finally over?
Reply and understand.
For months, Shakey's worked, and Shakey's waited, until we had the right crust, the right sauce, the right recipe for a great pan pizza. And now it's here. Getting to the bottom of a deep dish pan pizza never tasted so good. Shakey's new home-style pan pizza.
This is an Eyewitness News break, captioned for the hearing impaired.
Good morning, I'm Bob Dalton. As that hijacking in Beirut continues today, there's another apparent terrorist attack in Frankfurt, West Germany. Police say at least 3 people are dead and dozens injured in a bomb explosion at Frankfurt's international airport that occurred this morning. The pilot of the hijacked TWA Flight 847 says it is not a good idea for anybody to try and rescue the 40 American hostages. He spoke to reporters from his jet at Beirut's airport early this morning. He told them that he and 2 crew members are being treated well by the Shiite gunman. Mr. Reagan commented on the hijacking at his news conference last night. He said we have to wait it out to ensure the hostages' safety. And today he turns to tax reform, traveling to Indianapolis to promote his tax plan. The daughter of accused spy John Walker says her former husband was blackmailing her into custody over the 5-year-old son. Laura Walker Snyder says Philip Snyder of Laurel threatened to turn her father in if she tried to get the boy. Snyder and her mother tipped the FBI about this alleged Soviet spy ring. The daughter says her father tried to recruit her as a spy, too. And a 12-year-old Southwest Washington boy is in serious condition after a train accident last night. Anthony Crowder tried to climb onto a slow-moving freight train in South Capitol Street, slipped and fell under the wheels. He's at Children's Hospital. Sunny and less humid today. It'll be high about 85. Tonight, clear and mild, 53 to 60 in the morning. Tomorrow, a delightful day. More news coming up on Eyewitness News at noon.
When your baby is in bed, how does he sleep? Like the baby on the left who's all soggy, or the baby on the right who's wearing Loves. He's sleeping in drier nighties and sheets because Loves help stop leaking, and that keeps him more comfortable. So if his nighties stay drier, just imagine how much happier he wakes up. Your baby's comfort begins with Loves.
For nearly 60 years, Briggs Hot Dogs has been a Washington favorite. A hometown product popular for its freshness and great hot dog taste. And today, just like summers past, no cookout is complete without Briggs Hot Dogs. Washington has changed a lot over the years, but there's one thing you can still count on. You can never have enough Briggs Hot Dogs. This summer, savor your hometown flavor with Briggs Hot Dogs, Washington's top dog.
Sarah Lee invites you to a relaxing little supper with Mueller's sandwich croissant. Tempting little meals tucked inside a light, flaky Sarah Lee croissant. Ham and Swiss cheese. Chicken and broccoli. Settle back, huh? The night has just begun with Mueller's sandwich croissant. Tempting little meals from Sarah Lee.
Nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee.
Wednesday at 7:30, the wheel spins for $94,000.
Here it comes! Television's most exciting hour of fantastic prizes. The fabulous 60-minute prize is right. Stephanie Hayo! Come on down! Diane Gross! Come on down! And now, here's the star of The Price is Right, Bob Barker.
Hi, thank you. Welcome to The Price is Right. Oh, thank you. One of the guys backstage took a look at this shirt. He says, go out there and make them an offer they can't refuse. My offer is this. The first item up for bids in The Price is Right.
New exercise equipment. The amazing Hydra Fitness conditioning system automatically adjusts to the strength and speed of the individual through patented hydraulic cylinders. Compact exercise equipment from HydraFit Industries.
We will present that to the one of you four who bids nearest to the actual retail price without going over. Nancy, what do you say?
820.
820. Phyllis?
389.
399 or 89? 89 it is. I can't
600.
see your name. Is it Dixie? No, it's Diane.
600.
$600. Stephanie?
750.
$750. And the actual retail price is $1,170. Nancy, you win. Nancy, you win. Nancy, we want you up here. Thank you, Nancy. Right here. Right here. Now, Nancy, we want to start things off with a lot of excitement today. We want to start things off with you winning this.
A new car! A Ford Escort L two-door hatchback with front-wheel drive, four-cylinder engine, reclining high bucket seat, inside day-night mirror, dual-fold rear bench seat, and all the other standard equipment, plus California emission, power brakes, rear window defroster, and air conditioner. Bob?
Nancy, this is a special deck. We use this deck to find out how close you have to come to the retail price of that car without going over to win it. Draw a card. I hope it's $1,000. Look at that beautiful thing. $1,000. Now, in your bid on that car, all you have to do is come within $1,000, and anybody can do that, and you win the car. Cut the cards. You bid on the car with these cards. Aces are wild. You can make them anything you want. You can hold the ace and use it any time you want. The face cards and the tens are $1,000. The other cards are the number on the card and hundreds of dollars. Your bid at the moment is $2,000. Now, we're going to add to that bid as you draw. When you want to stop, when you think you're within $1,000 without going over, you say, I stop. Let me see you do that.
I stop.
Now, you haven't started yet. That's too soon. Go ahead. Draw a card.
Okay.
$300 for that three of clubs. Your bid is $2,300.
I'm going to go.
Well, sure. You go right as long as you want to. You're the boss. $800 more gives you a bid of $3,100.
Again.
And $500.